Hello, YouTube. This is UMOSO3. We've made it to lesson 19 of the Java curriculum. Lesson 20. So now all of the code that we've written so far has occurred in one location. It's the main method. The only exception to that is maybe in one video tutorial, we basically had to import the scanner class. So we had a scanner object imported up here, but all of our code up to this point has occurred in the main method. What we want to do now is come up with a way to make our code a little bit more modular and to break it up into pieces. So what we do is we think about something called functions. We think about something called methods. And basically what methods are basically blocks of code that achieve particular tasks. And what we can do is we can create our own functions and our own methods. So we've already seen examples of functions and methods when we were looking, for example, at string methods in lessons 5 and 6, or when we were looking at math methods in lesson 19, just in the previous video, we were looking at different functions. It turns out we can come up with our own functions and call them in the main method. So what we're going to do is the goal is to move some of our programming out of the main method. So now use the main method as a sandbox to test other functionality that we can create in our class. So we've been thinking of this file with green and yellow shading as a class. So now we're still going to be working in the Hello World class, but from now on, not all of our code is going to be going in the main method anymore. And so you're going to see some advantages to creating functions, creating methods. And that's what we're going to be doing in this video. We're going to be creating a static method. A static method, you don't really need to know exactly what static means for now. What you need to know is that it means that it stands on its own. So you don't need to do anything particularly important or special in order to call a static method. It basically just exists on its own. I'm going to elaborate on exactly what is meant by static in a future video once we start talking about object-oriented fundamentals. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new function. So right now we only have one function in our class, and it's called the main method. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function called f, and here's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to say public static int f of int x. Okay, so let's think about, this is called a method header. Okay, and so we have to think about the different things that a method header has. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a multiple line comment here before the method starts. So you can have comments anywhere. Your comments don't have to go in a method. They could even go between two methods. They could go outside of the class. You could even have a, actually no, they can't go outside of the class, but you can have comments anywhere. So I'm just going to write a comment, and then this, so we are creating a new method or a new function. You can call it a function. Okay, and so with a method header, we have different attributes. So is it public or private? And so we're going to be clarifying what that means in future videos. But public means that this method can be accessed from other classes. So right now we're just working in the Hello World class. You can see the architecture here. We have a program with just one Java file, just one class. But if we were to make this private, that means that the only way we could call f is in Hello World. So, but we're going to make it public, but don't worry about that. We're going to talk more about that in a future video. Static is, so it's a static method. Again, don't worry too much about that now. So it's going to be either a static or instance method. You know, will be discussed at length in a future video, and I'll try to include a comment to where we start talking a little bit more about what these things mean. But what you have to understand is that there's a return type. So that means that f will return an integer. Always when you call f, okay, when you set the result of the function f equal to something, you set it equal to an integer. It's going to spit out an integer. This is what the method does. And then you have the name. The name of the method is f. Okay, so it's whatever is right before the parentheses. So it could be called anything. So what is this function down here called? This one is called main. We call it the main method, but this one is called f. So right before the parentheses, we see that this method is called f. Okay, and then the last thing that we have is we have an input. So this function accepts one integer. arbitrarily called x. So it doesn't matter really if we could have said y up here, but it has to be consistent. So what this method does is it says it returns an integer. It's called f. And in order to use f, in order to get an integer out of f, you need to feed it an integer. You need to give it an integer. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say the way that f works is it's going to accept x. It's going to return x plus 4. Okay, and so now what we're going to do is we're going to see the output of calling this function f on a particular input. So now what we're going to do is in the main method, we're going to come down here and we're going to say system.out.println of f of 2. So let's think about what this does. What it's going to do is it's going to call the f function on the input 2, and it's going to return the result of that. We're saying print f of 2, but what is f of 2? Well, according to the return type, according to this red int that you see here, f is expected to return an integer. So that's what it's going to be returning. It's going to return an integer, and in particular, it's going to return 2 plus 4, so it should return 6. So then if we go ahead and run this main method, we get 6 because we ran the function f with an input of 2. What if we run f with an input of 15? Then we're going to get a different result. So now we compile it, and if we have a different input, then f will have a different output. It just returns 4 bigger than the number because that's the rule. That's what we told it to return. It returns an integer just being 4 larger than the integer. It turns out that it doesn't matter how the ordering of these methods occurs. So even if you had copied and pasted, let's copy and paste this method so that it actually occurs underneath the main method. So normally when we talk about creating variables in Java, we need to initialize a variable before we can use it, right? We need to say int x equals 10 before we can say print x. But it turns out that here we can actually call on f even if f is not declared until later on in the class. So it's okay, the ordering is fine here. So now what you could do, we'll come up with a different rule. What if we just want to return the number 80? So you can see this function, this is an example of a constant function. So this one, the output doesn't actually technically depend on x. So f of 15 should return 80, but f of 32 should also return 80. So now we should just print the number 80 twice according to what we're expecting from this method. And that's exactly what we see. We see 80 and 80. So that's essentially the operation of a static method. And you could have more than one function in here. Let's add another function. This one will also return an integer, but this time we're going to accept 2 parameters, and we're going to call them different things. So we're going to say int p and int q, okay? And what this method does is it accepts 2 integers, and it's going to return 2 plus p minus q. Okay, so that's what it does. It accepts 2 integers, and it computes 2 plus the first integer minus the second integer, and out comes that int. Okay, so the return type is still an int. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say int x equals g of 10 and 4. Let's think about what x is going to be set equal to. So we're creating a variable in space, and we're going to say that x is equal to the output of the function g when I pass in the inputs 10 and 4. So what is 2 plus 10 minus 4? That should be 8, right? So that would be 8. So then that means that x is 8. So then if we have boolean y is the idea that x is not equal to 8, then if we go ahead and print the truth value of y, this should be false because we're seeing that x is 8, right? And so then here, if we're asserting that 8 is not equal to 8, well, that's false. 8 is equal to 8. So now if we run this code, we have our 2 80s from f of 15 and f of 32. And then now we say false, that the output of g of 10, 4 is not equal to 8. It is equal to 8, according to how we define the function. So hopefully that's all clear to you. And so these are just a couple of examples of methods. What if you want to accept something other than an int? What if you want to return 2 times the length of a string? So what we're going to do is we're going to do public static int twice the length. twice the length. We're going to create a function that accepts a string called s. You can call it, this parameter name, you can call it whatever you want. Let's call it sock, okay, sock. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that string, which we're arbitrarily calling sock, whatever sock is, and we're just going to return 2 times the length. So it's going to be 2 times sock.length, and that's going to be the result. So for example, if you pass in the word remote, then the output of twice the length, if you accept remote, the word remote, should be 6, because 2 times 6 is 12. Okay, so now if you do, and you can go ahead and test that. What if we make a double out of it? What if we make a double out of it? So what if we say double T equals twice the length of rock? Okay, rock, sock, it doesn't matter. You could have even called it sock, but let's call it rock. Twice the length of rock. So here, T should be set equal to 8.0, because, the method returns 8, but it's saying double T equals 8. Okay, so T is really going to be 8.0. So now if you say system.out.println of T times 2, you're not going to get 16, you get 16.0, right? So there's really a multiplying by 4 factor in here, right? Because you have the 2 times here, and then you have a times 2 here. So if it's 4 letters, 4 times 4 is 16, but with this double here, double T, you should have 16.0. So now we're going to run the method. And now if we run, you want to run the main method. The main method is like your sandbox, okay? So if we run the main method, we get that 16.0. For testing purposes, if you just want to figure out what the output is of an independent standalone static function that you make, what you can do with BlueJ, this is a BlueJ thing, is you can go to your project, right? And we still just have one class, but when you right click on the class, we used to only have one method to run, and that was the main method. But now you can figure out what integer would be outputted if you passed in a particular input. So let's do an easy example first. So f of x, remember that f of x is just x plus 4. Okay, so what you would do, let's go ahead and feed in 66, and then it's going to, oh no, sorry, we changed f, right, to just get 80. We just get 80 every time, right? It used to be x plus 4. Let's switch it back. So we get return x plus 4, right? And so now if we do f of 0, you get 4, okay? But if you do f of -2, you get +2. Okay, same thing, you can type in a string here. You can type in a string and just test these individually. So what if you wanted to do just a capital U, right? So then this would return 2. Why does it not return 2.0? Because we're only calling the method itself. Remember, in the main method, we created a double T and we set it equal to the result of this method, but the method itself just returns an integer. Okay, so if you just feed it a capital U, you should get a 2, right? Because a capital U, that's 1 letter long, 2 times 1 is 2, and that's how the method is defined. So those are just sort of the very, very, very basics of functions. I guess, you can have different return types too. So all of these methods have been returning ints. What if we want to return a boolean? So let's try to figure out whether a string has an even number of letters in it. So let's do public static boolean even number letters of string T. So we're going to accept a string. We're going to arbitrarily call it T. It doesn't matter what you make this parameter name, but it has to be the name that you use throughout the definition. So if you kind of want to call this string octopus, then you'd have to be checking to see that octopus.length mod 2 is equal to 0. But for T, we're going to say return T.length mod 2 equals 0. This is a boolean. This is going to result in either true or false depending on what T is. Okay, so for example, if you say pot, P-O-T, that's 3 letters. That's not an even number of letters, so we would expect false. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Let's create an if-else. We want to practice a little bit more with if-else. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say if even number letters of house, what we're gonna do is we're gonna say system.out.println of f of 10 plus f of 2. Okay? Otherwise, what we're going to do is we're going to say system.out.println g of f of 2, f of 3. So let's figure out what would be printed here. So I'm going to let's go ahead and just comment out or delete some of the old code from here. I'm just going to go ahead and delete some of this other sandbox code that we had earlier in the video. So now let's look at even number letters of house. So even number letters of house, is that true or false? Well, that returns false because house.length is 5. 5 divided by 2 is 2 with a remainder of 1. 1 is not equal to 0. So we don't run this code, we run the else code instead. So since this is a false boolean, we run else instead. So we're going to print g of f of 2 and f of 3. So f of 2 should be 6 and f of 3 should be 7. So now you're passing 6 and 7 into g. So it's going to be 2 plus 6 minus 7, which should be 1. So we should print the number 1. And now if we go ahead and do that, so if we go ahead and run the main method, indeed we get 1. So hopefully this was helpful. So there's a couple of things that you want to take, that you want to understand, because we're going to pick up where we left off in the next video. So what we're going to do, what we have to understand is that functions can have different return types. Functions can accept more than one input. You know, and certainly not just ints, you know, because like down here we accepted a string, and then here we accepted 2 ints. You can have any combination of inputs that you want, and so we're going to pick up these sort of examples and come up with some more difficult examples in the next video. But for now, I just wanted you to understand that we can create our own static methods, and you need to write public static, and then the return type, and then the name of the method, and then any parameters that will come in as inputs. So that's enough for now. Try to make your own functions and practice calling them in our main method sandbox, and that's essentially what the roadmap is going forward. From UMills03, thanks for watching, and please subscribe.